All right, we've got some questions rolling in here. So Talia asks, pacing, how do you hold back to avoid the boom and bust cycle? So, good question. This is a really challenging one. This is something that I know I've struggled with a lot myself when I was going through my own healing and recovery journey, and a lot of brain retrainers and people struggle with this. And it's really, how do you move forward slowly and steadily in a way where we can be consistent without overstretching, overreaching, then having to go back into a phase of excessive rest, or what we call involuntary withdrawal. Now, let me just caveat this by saying sometimes this is unavoidable, and we always need to be compassionate with ourselves first and foremost. As much as we want recovery to be this up into the right linear path, it's definitely fraught with some setbacks, some loop-de-loops, and really at the end of the day, the most important thing is consistency. It's just that no matter what happens, we get up and we just keep going. That being said, there are some definite things that you can do that will really help you to foster a little bit more consistency and less of this more virulent wave pattern that we sometimes find ourselves falling into. And we talk about this in the Reorigin program in a section called Finding Your Sweet Spot. So one of the things that you can do is, we're all familiar with setting what's called lower bound limits for ourselves, right? That's something like every day I'm going to commit to doing 5 minutes a day of brain retraining, or 1 minute a day of brain retraining, or going for a walk to the end of the block, whatever it might be, whatever is within your sweet spot. We know how to set these kind of goals for ourselves that we can pursue on a daily basis. One thing that a lot of people aren't so aware of, I certainly wasn't, is that we can also use goal setting and limits as something called an upper bound limit. So we can say, okay, I'm going to do no less than 5 minutes of brain retraining a day, and I'm going to do no more than 15 minutes of brain retraining a day, or I'm going to walk for 5 minutes a day, and I'm going to walk for no more than 15 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day, whatever feels within your sweet spot. Now, why would we want to do this? Why would we want to put a cap or a limit on how much we can do, especially on those days when we're feeling good? Well, sometimes what can happen, and again, I know from experience, is that we go through these periods where we haven't been feeling good, we haven't had energy for so long, and then we start to get energy. We start to pursue brain retraining or breathing or different exercises, and it starts to work. And we start to feel, oh my God, I have all this energy that I didn't have before. And what do we want to do? Well, we want to use that energy. We want to go socialize. We want to get out there. We want to get back into exercise. We want to do all these things that maybe we felt like we were deprived of doing for so long. So it's very natural and understandable for us to overstretch, overreach, and then find ourselves in these scenarios where we're sort of forced to take a step back again. And this is part of the learning process. First, let me just say that this is okay if you've experienced this. But again, coming back to using strategies and things like those upper bound limits, one of the things that I myself and many of our members have found very helpful is to set those upper limits as well as those lower limits for ourselves. The aim is not to be perfectionists here. It's simply to have that framework, that guiding framework for us to work within, so that when we have that abundance of energy, that overflow of energy, which is great, we can harvest it, we can utilize it with more intention and kind of aim it with a bit of accuracy so that it can actually replenish us over a longer period of time instead of just using it over a short period of time. This takes practice. It is a dance. It doesn't happen overnight, but the more you practice this and engage with this process of staying within your sweet spot or your working zone, the more habitual it comes, the easier you have a time of finding it and getting back into it, and the smoother that process becomes. Lastly, one thing you can do, and this is kind of a mindset shift around these energy fluctuations, because again, I know how challenging it can be to wake up one day and have sufficient energy to do certain things, wake up the next day and for seemingly no reason find that the energy isn't there, right? Imagine that sometimes there is this pendulum swing, this oscillation that occurs, and we're not always aware of what's causing it, but it happens, right? We have two options. We can try to resist it, right? That would be like the pendulum is swinging and we're trying to push against it. But this creates resistance in our body. It creates more tension that then needs to be released. We have a second option. Imagine for a moment that you climb the string of that pendulum, right? The pendulum is still swinging beneath you, but the higher up that string you go, the less influenced, the less affected you are by those fluctuations. So how do we do this? What would that actually look like or feel like? Well, in this case, it can look like breathing, relaxing, allowing ourselves or helping ourselves to become just a little bit less attached to the outcome of those energy fluctuations. And this is something that our brain retraining program at Reorigin can really help with, because we talk a lot about disidentification from what's currently going on symptomatically or energetically in our systems. Now, this isn't to say that we want to ignore or separate, from what's happening, but we do want to take this distanced sort of observer approach where we're not getting emotionally tied into it, because we know that regardless of what we're feeling, whether it's low energy or pain or another symptom, when we feel emotionally agitated by that, it adds this second layer that inhibits that symptomology from naturally flowing through us. So symptoms, or especially things like emotions, resistance, worry, is a chemical. And just like any chemical in the system, it has a half-life. And if we resist it, if we get upset about it, if we ruminate on it, unwittingly, what we might be doing is actually extending the half-life of those chemicals that are causing the discomfort in the first place. So for this reason, and I know easier said than done, but we have a whole program that gets into this and helps with this, is we want to be compassionate with ourselves. We want to set up a framework that will help us to deal more strategically and effectively with these fluctuations that we all experience. And then finally, we want to see if we can climb that string of the pendulum and give ourselves a little bit of buffer so that we're not so mentally and emotionally and psychologically impacted by these fluctuations that I know can really wear us down. So this was a little bit of a long-winded explanation or answer, but I hope you found this helpful.